Some people have said my avatar freaks them out, so I figured I'd do this week's speech with an actual video. If it works well, maybe I'll do it more often. If you can't stand the look of my actual face, I understand that as well. Either way, let me know what you think. In last week's reading, Moab and Midian tried to deal with the Jewish people by manipulating God. When they failed at that, they decided to manipulate us instead. It was a pretty good plan, except it ended horribly, with Midian being wiped out and the Jewish people's relationship with God being forever altered. The whole sordid affair was started by Moab and Midian's unwarranted fear and disgust. We may not be able to manage the fear of others, but we need to manage their disgust. According to the prestigious firm of Ekman, Friedson, and Ellsworth, basic human emotions include surprise or fear, joy, sadness, anger, and disgust. Of these, only disgust is learned. A baby isn't bothered by poop. This is why disgust is what defines cultures. It's why the disgusting is so critical to defining Judaism or any other culture. Except perhaps the Agori branch of Hinduism, but don't even Google that, it's nasty. For us, disgust is more than an unfiltered emotion, though. We have to be able to understand why we define it the way we do. Otherwise, we can't strengthen our own ideological purpose while sharing our values. We can't prevent others from wanting to destroy us. In the case of Parshat Balak, we failed to understand or defend our values, and so we fell easily to Ba'al Peor. It was easy to be supplanted by the disgust of others. Peor is, by the way, deeply incompatible with Judaism. Our religion has us trying to approach God on His terms by covering ourselves as we draw closer to Him. We cover, we do not expose. But Peor means expose. It represents in a very contemporary way an incompatible value system. After the people sin with Ba'al Peor, Hashem calls on Moshe to carry out a public display of wrath, stringing up the leaders in the sun. Moshe changes the command, calling on the people to kill those engaged with Ba'al Peor. But nobody does anything. A plague starts, and the rule of God has fundamentally broken down. And then Pinchas steps in, flatly following the command of both Moshe and Hashem, publicly killing a leader literally joined with Ba'al Peor. Pinchas carries this out in a highly symbolic way. He uses a spear to permanently join Cosby and Zimri. He turns the sex act into a destructive one, underpinning the effects of cheating on God. It is, like Sota, a very public act meant as an object lesson, and it saves the people by sealing them against the effects of their sin. Pinchas isn't a lawless zealot. He does what both Hashem and Moshe command, but he does so without dialogue or argument, which kind of freaks us out. What should really freak us out is that Pinchas' approach is established as the dominant one going forward. After Pinchas, we follow Hashem with far less dialogue, argument, or thought than we did before. Basically, we couldn't handle the reasoned understanding behind our disgust, and so we went for an unreasoned version instead. Looking at the reproductive role of male and female, the male is willful, while the female is actualizing and distinct. I like to look at Adam as planting crops, but Adamah, the earth, yielding them. A man has positive and negative reproductive will, but only a female can actualize that will. After Pinchas, we take on a far more female role. Please note, I'm talking about the symbolism of reproduction, not the character of individual people. We all know plenty of willful women and actualizing men, and I'm hoping the former don't kill me after this Devar Torah. Anyway, the Jewish people lose some of their willfulness in the relationship with God and instead become the vehicle for the actualization of God's place in this world. This idea is rolled out in a series of more and more explicit steps. First, there's a census that reaffirms God's love for the people by raising up their heads. This census de-emphasizes the role of the religiously willful while counting those who simply continued their father's line. For example, while it is a census of men for the army, it explicitly includes Serach, daughter of Asher, who, short of an undisclosed miracle, has been dead for centuries, had no children, and would never have been in the army. She is counted because the strength of Israel comes from carrying on the values of our father's houses, even in the feminine role. Even after death, we can be counted because our values end up woven into the people. The next stage is the command to fix the apportionment of land by family. Now this is highly impractical. If you're into history, just look at the effect it had on Charlemagne's empire. The basic problem is that different growth rates of families would result in wildly different inheritances. The children of the fecund might inherit a postage stamp, while the more proper wasps of the day would get a proper field. But inheriting by family serves a function aside from practicality. If a wife secretly cheats and has another man's kids, it cuts into the portion of the legitimate children. In this way, family inheritance reinforces the importance of fidelity within the people and its connection to fidelity with God. Looking at it on a national scale, the land as a whole is our inheritance from our relationship with Hashem. If we sleep with other gods, then Hashem is denied his portion. When Zelophehad's daughters ask for a portion because their father had no sons, Moshe asks God an explicit question for the very last time. It isn't an accident. When Hashem says Zelophehad's daughters can inherit, try saying that 50 times, he is saying the Jewish people can be our forefathers' daughters, taking on an actualizing and not a willful role, and still inherit the relationship with God. Note the daughters of Zelophehad were hardly shrinking violets. They check back in the book of Yehoshua, and they ensure that they get what they demand here. So this theme of becoming less willful and more actualizing continues with the passing of the mantle of leadership to Yehoshua. You see, unlike Moshe, Yehoshua isn't to talk directly with Hashem. Instead, he uses the Kohen's Urim and Tumim to communicate. No matter how great a man he may yet become, the two-way dialogue has been kneecapped by the Pinchas episode. Rule of law has been replaced with rule by God's law. We end the reading with a schedule of offerings. It is presented straight up with no explanation. Even the Pesach offering isn't explained. This hammers home the point. In this reading, we walk away from meaning and will and replace it with following just because. We become Hashem's actualization, carrying forward his values in a far less willful way. Going back to the beginning, the people were unable to stand up for the values of Hashem. We were unable to defend them, even within our community. Instead, we paid homage to the values of Peor. We paid homage to the values of those who were disgusted by us. We demonstrated that we lacked the willpower for a more three-dimensional relationship. We were too easily tempted by other value systems. This is why, in next week's reading, we are given the first command to genocide the inhabitants of the land. We can't deal with other ideologies, and so we have to exterminate them from our land. I don't know about you, but I find that command just a bit disturbing. So disturbing, in fact, that I wonder, is this the only path? Can we encounter the values of other cultures and still maintain our core focus? Can we engage with the world and still stick to our values and not theirs? The question remains an open one. After all, many who engage with the world are co-opted into the dominant ideologies of their day. It's been this way for thousands of years. But I don't think it has to remain this way. The Torah does not start with Pinchas. It does not start with rote law. The Torah before this reading still exists, and it offers us a path back to another relationship. I believe we can still come to terms with our fundamental value system, which is focused on maximizing acts of creation and investment in the timeless, while symbolically distancing ourselves from destruction and loss. We can still come to terms with the values of the menorah and the burning bush, burning with spiritual flame, but not consuming in the process. We can still come to terms with these values and understand what is disgusting to them. And I believe we can use this understanding to challenge the disgust of other nations while sharing the fundamentally creative values of our own. Last but not least, I believe that we can re-engage with God himself as in days of old. Shabbat Shalom.